Hello and welcome back to another episode of Nick Tiffany's Movie Reviews, coming at you online and in print format at nicktiffany.com, in audio format wherever you get your podcasts, and even in video on YouTube, TikTok, Reels, pretty much wherever you have social media, you can find us. Today we're going to do a brief one. I caught up with Amazon Prime's Roadhouse. I'm going to be honest, I've never seen the original Roadhouse. I know it's Patrick Swayze. I have seen all the Family Guy compilations. I mean, I remember when that episode came out, no idea what Roadhouse was other than some guy in a bar beating people up. Sure, out here in the Washington, Seattle area, there's not many bar fights maybe as compared to when I was in Texas, but it always seemed just kind of like a funny foreign concept of, I'm like, oh yeah, a movie about bar fights, because that happens all the time. So having not seen the Swayze original, when they said they were going to make a new one, the only thing that kind of had me mildly interested was the fact that Doug Liman was going to be making the movie. I'm still clinging on to hope that, he can make another film like Edge of Tomorrow, but unfortunately that was not the case here. I'm just going to go on record and say, like, I'm a big Jake Gyllenhaal fan. I am a fan of him more so as a dramatic actor, I'd say, than anything. And his fighting movies, especially after watching this one again, they just don't interest me nearly as much as most of his other work does. This one's kind of somewhere in between. He gets to do a little bit of cheesy comedy, but even then, it's like, look how ripped Jake Gyllenhaal is. And I'm like, he's gotten ripped for Southpaw and he's been ripped for other movies. And it's fine. Like, those movies are enjoyable to a degree, but even this one more so. They tease all this UFC fighting background that his character Dalton has. I remember when they were actually at some UFC weigh-in or fight night where they were filming for the movie, and for everything that they built that up to be, there was hardly any of that in the movie. It's kind of teased what he did in UFC and what happened and why he left and why he's pretty much homeless now. So it just, I don't know. I like Jake Gyllenhaal, but I just don't think that being the ultimate badass fighter is his thing. And it like really felt like this movie wanted to be like the Amazon Prime Reacher show with Alan Ritchson, who's just monstrous and hulking without having to have the super shredded, washboard, crazy Gyllenhaal abs. There's something about him that is just physically intimidating. And so what they try to do with Gyllenhaal in that role, even if like the people know he's a UFC guy, like, hey man, I'm not going to fight him. It just doesn't play nearly as well or as funny as I think they were hoping that it would. I'm just going to go out and say that Conor McGregor, I don't know what he's doing in this movie. If you've seen any of his promotion for the film or anything leading up to this, it seems like, I'm like, I don't know, interviews, it feels like he's tweaking. He's kind of like, I don't know if he's hungover or on something, but he's bouncing. He's just like blinking rapidly and speaking slurs. And you're like, I don't know what's going on here. But that aside, he comes into this movie shot out of a cannon from some other completely different movie. He's like, I'm going to wreak havoc here and do whatever. That side of things just didn't mesh for me. I think I've seen a lot of people kind of talking about the action in the film, and in some ways it kind of worked for me. There's some moments that were exciting and really engaging. And I've seen on Twitter them talking about this technique they did with this 4-pass kind of camera technique where someone's going to throw a punch, then in another shot, someone's going to have like a green CGI bag that they hit at full speed, and then they'll do a shot of the person getting hit, kind of like getting hit by the green bag, and then they do a fourth shot. So, I think the idea being we're trying to keep up the look of the power of some of the hits and kicks without it obviously hurting our actors. And truthfully, the way it kind of comes out edited really looks like CGI, kind of looks really wonky. You don't know if they, like, I thought for the longest time that they were playing with the frame rate, and they're either shooting this at a higher frame rate or they're speeding it up to make it look more impactful or something. Either way, it just kind of looked odd, to be honest. And there's this scene where a truck on on some bridge is trying to back into our character, and it just looked weird. And it happens so quickly, and it just doesn't, I don't know, it just doesn't feel right. It doesn't quite have that AI feel like some people have said. And I get that they were trying to do something different here, but it just does not work well. I would touch on the story and the script, but there's hardly a semblance of either of those that really is worth talking about. It really is just like, hey, some guys try to trash my roadhouse. Will you come down and be a bouncer because we can't keep them? Sure, you got it. I'll be your bouncer. And so he becomes the bouncer, and there's just an absurd amount of violence that goes on in this bar. You don't know why, or like, this little town in the Florida Keys. You get the impression that, some wealthy people are trying to take over. You don't really spend time with the people there. There's like a little girl who they kind of try to make a little friendship relationship out of with Gyllenhaal's character, but even that just kind of falls flat. One of the guys who wrote The Nice Guys wrote this movie, and I could see a lot of parallels with kind of how they take the character, different comedic beats, but again, none of it, especially knowing that now, I was just like, oh, so all the things that I thought of like, oh, this kind of reminds me of Ryan Gosling and his daughter. It was like, yeah, so that was true. It just wasn't nearly as funny or as good. So I don't know. There's moments here too where like the film score goes on for too long. And maybe these are just nitpicky things, but like in moments that should be a little more serious or feel serious, they try to like undercut it with comedy. And sometimes I just wish they'd let a serious moment ride so that you can feel some of the stakes, or you feel like, okay, like I guess it's not all fun and games, because for the most part here, it was pretty much just fun and games. Uh, so I don't know. Jessica Williams and Daniela Melchior, they're fun and they're fine in the film. They don't really get to do too much, unfortunately. One's kind of like a touted love interest versus, my boss who kind of knows about the island and is holding things back. And so the holding back of cards and information really just kind of keeps you from these characters, unfortunately. And so that just kind of bummed me out, I guess, because I was like, okay, there could be some interesting people here if we share the spotlight. But no, we're going to spend time with the bumbling, buffoon, idiot goons who, like, it feels like are emulating the Coen brothers, sort of, maybe just with like the conversational humor bits they're trying to do. And again, some of that goes to that Alan Reacher today where it's like, I got a knife, man. Aren't you scared of me? And it's like, dude, I'm just going to break your wrist and I'm going to hurt you. Why would I be scared? And it kind of works from Gyllenhaal, but it kind of doesn't. So I don't know. Obviously, I don't have anything to compare this to. I haven't seen the original Roadhouse, as I've said. But watching this movie, it was just like, wow, the dialogue's not great. Some of the action's good, but some of this just looks like weirdly questionable. I don't know. It wasn't the worst time watching a movie, but I definitely am glad that it was a streaming release and that I didn't go pay to see this in theaters, because I think that would have been a little more annoying. I probably wouldn't have done it in the first place. So I'm glad it was on streaming at least. But I don't know. If you need something mindless that's good for the background, Roadhouse is probably right up there for you. But I don't know. Call me pretty underwhelmed by this one, unfortunately. Thank you again for listening. And as always, you guys can find us at NT Movie Reviews on all social media networks, podcast platforms, even on YouTube, TikTok, Reels, wherever you get your social media. That's where you can find us. Thank you again, and we'll see you next time.